Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Q&A video where I answer your questions each week. I got some pretty great questions, actually a lot of questions, so I'm just going to get right into it. By the way, if you have a question you want to ask it in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer it next week. So let's get right into it. The first question comes from Wilson IR, or I. And he asks, great video as always. I decided to resort my collection alphabetically by title. I had 3 Marvel Comics Presents 72, but for the life of me, I can only find one. See, I was talking about last week about how I couldn't find a comic. Still haven't found it, by the way. In regards to your Good Girl collection, do you have any Dave Stevens? I don't recall having having shown any of these. Well, I actually have shown my Dave Stevens collection multiple times. I actually have pretty much the complete David Stevens collection of all the covers that he has done. But I'm going to show you some of my favorites. And that, you can check my older QA videos for others. Like I actually show about 60 or so in one video. So, but we'll just show the best ones. My favorite ones. We're going to start with Space Vixens. I really like this cover. This is a nice David Stevens. And it's actually interesting because this one, he actually signs it with his full name. Normally it's just DS. But yeah, that's Space Vixens. Another Good Girl one. I like the Good Girl ones, so these are all Good Girl ones. So we got, Vanguard Illustrated. And then we got Betty Page. Alien Worlds, number 4. And then we got Planet Comics. Jungle Comics. Johnny Quest. Number 5, I believe. Yeah, number 5. And then we have, this is like a special, like a variant cover by David Stevens with the Rocketeer, Betty from the Rocketeer. So I'm not sure which issue number it is, but it's a variant cover. And then we have another one. This is Cheval Noir, and this is issue number 7. He did a couple of the covers for this title. And another Betty Page one, Betty Page on the Nile. Like that one. And one more of Betty Page on the Nile. So I thought these were really great. Okay, so those are my favorite ones. Some of my favorite ones. There's actually more, but I figure that's pretty good sampling. K. Munin asked, thanks for answering my question. I hope you find that misplaced comic you mentioned at the beginning. Have you ever passed on a comic for cheap only to see it go up in price later? Are there any comic series you wish you had started collecting a lot sooner? Well, during COVID, like there was a lot of stuff that kind of went crazy in price. So there was a lot during that time period. But one comic that I actually remember way back when that I passed on, and I didn't know what it was really. I thought it was cool, but I didn't realize how cool, was Tales of Suspense number 39, first appearance of Iron Man. Because back in the day, I didn't really have a proper guide to say, hey, this is the first appearance of Iron Man. I didn't know. And there was a comic shop that was going out of business. It was selling things at 75 to 90% off. And they had a Tales of Suspense 39. And at the time, Iron Man wasn't really a major character anyways. So the book was relatively cheap. Probably could have picked it up for $50 to $100 kind of level, I would think. And it was a high grade, like very high grade. So it was one of those wall books. I just didn't realize what it was. And I always kicked myself because I remember it. And I think, oh, that's a kind of a cool cover. I wonder what it is. But it's number 39. It can't be anything too significant. So I sort of passed on it. Yeah, that was dumb. I always kick myself about that one. So yeah, in terms of series that I wish I had collected earlier, um, so Goon would be one. I really enjoy Goon. I kind of wish I got that right at the beginning. Um, I collected Bone back in the 90s, and I kind of got into it on probably, I think it was about on the 5th issue, and then I had to sort of pay up for the earlier issues. So I was, at the time it seemed like huge money. Now, it was actually a major, majorly inexpensive. Like, I mean, I paid for first prints of 1 through 3. I think it was like a couple $100, and they're all high grade. So it turned out to be okay in the end, but back in the day, I wish I had just a few months earlier gotten those books. They had gone up really quickly. There was a lot of interest around Bone. So yeah, so those would be the ones that I kind of wish I had gotten in on earlier. Another one that I was kind of wish I had gotten in on earlier was Sandman. I sort of got into Sandman when it was like issue like 30 or 40. I was like way way late on that one. So yeah, those would be the ones that I probably would have liked to have gotten in on sooner. Mark Webb asked, question, and I apologize if you've already addressed this. Are you into modern horror comics? And if so, what titles would you recommend? I'm already collecting Shudder, Ghost Lore, Creepshow, and The Neighbors. So here are some titles that I've actually read and think were reasonable. Ice Cream Man. I found it hit or miss. So I actually sometimes I really enjoy it, and sometimes I think sometimes it doesn't end the best. It starts out really, really strong and then doesn't. The stories don't necessarily end as well as I would have hoped, but it's a cool series. Stray Dogs, I thought was solid all the way through. Department of Truth is like I've read the first, I think, like 8 issues or something like that. I read pretty far in, and I've enjoyed it. And it's a James Tynion book. He also did another one called A Nice House on the Lake. I really enjoyed that. And another series that I enjoyed was Bunny Mask. So those are horror titles that I've enjoyed that are modern titles. Next question. I like what I buy. Wrote, I have another question for next week. I found Girls Romances 105 in a long box at the LCS for $16. The cover grabbed my attention. Then I checked eBay, and the prices for this book are nuts. What's the story behind this great looking book? Well, Girls Romances number 105 has a panel inside of it that was stolen. Not stolen, but plagiarized by the famous pop artist Roy Lichtenstein. And basically, the interior panel was illustrated by Tony Abruzzo, and basically he wasn't given any like credit for, or compensation for the fact that Lichtenstein had basically stolen this panel. And the panel was like a woman sleeping. And in 2012, though, the painting that called Sleeping Girl that used this panel, that basically is a swipe of the panel, sold for $44.8 million at Sotheby's auction. So that major piece of history, and the fact that the art had been stolen from a comic, and then the art had sold for so much money, well, people kind of, love that story, and they go after that book. There was actually 2 books within the title that Roy Lichtenstein had stolen artwork from. I forget what the other issue was, but the other one was a scene where it's like a driving it's on the cover where he basically takes that little bit of that cover panel and then uses it for his artwork. And I think that sold for a few million as well, like 25 million or something crazy. So that's the story behind it. So if you get plagiarized by a famous artist, then your comic will become very valuable. So that's the reasoning behind it. Okay, this next one, I actually searched a lot to try to find the answer to this next question. And this is from my friend Stephen Gettner. He asked, Alan, I wanted to ask you about the Comic Code Authority. Who funded it? What was the budget? Where was it located? How many people worked there? Who was the boss of the Comic Codes Authority? And what lead time did companies have to work with submitting books for approval? Why did the Comics Code Authority cease operations? Who decided to stop its operation? When did the Comic Code Authority cease operations? Okay, so those are some of the questions. It was just like a lot of questions about the Comic Code Authority. Now, if you're not familiar, back in the day, back in 1954, the Comic Code Authority was put into play. And it was put into play because of the backlash to the really over-the-top comics that came out in the late, or like 1954. And then there was Senate hearings, and there was like, that just basically ended the comics, or well, looked at ending the comics. So the Comic Code Authority came into play in 1954, and really the first books that got the Comic Code Authority symbol on them were in 1955, March of 1955. The Comic Code Authority was put into place by the different publishers. So they were the ones that kind of created the Comic Code Authority, and it was a non-governmental branch. It was just like this separate entity. And I believe that all the publishers kind of contributed to its funding. How much it was funded, don't know. Where it was located was probably New York. But that is not even clear. It doesn't even, if you search for it, it doesn't say. You can't find it. It was actually called the Comics Magazine Association of America was the title of the official company. But there's really little information about it. If you look pretty much on every website, and I've looked at about 30 or 40 websites that had any information, they all had the same exact. It was almost like somebody just copied and pasted, even like on DC Comics, on Comic Vine, on Wikipedia. It was always the same article that was basically recycled across them all. And I was kind of shocked by that, how little information they gave about the actual Comic Code Authority itself. They didn't say who ran it. They didn't say where it was run. They didn't say how it worked. They didn't say how many people were involved with it. They didn't say how the submission process worked, which I thought was kind of a major thing, but they didn't explain that. There was really little information about it. There was more information about the American Association of Comic Authority kind of thing that happened before it. That they actually say who it was. Delacorte that was the president of that. But there's no information of who was involved with the Comic Magazine Association of America, which was the thing that actually ran the Comic Code Authority. It's very weird. But I can tell you a few things that were revealed. By the early 2000s, the publishers bypassed the Comic Code Authority. So really, there was a string of things that kind of led to the downfall of the Comic Code Authority. Like back in the 70s, actually, Stan Lee kind of, he wanted to release his Spider-Man comic with a drug-related story. Well, that was not approved by the Comic Code Authority. And it was one of the things that kind of, publishers were kind of like, okay, we won't use your code authority at this point. We'll go around you, okay? And what was happening was more and more books were basically, they didn't even bother going through the process because they knew that they wouldn't get past the process. So they basically were ignoring it for a while. And by 2001, Marvel had stopped using the Comic Code Authority. By 2010, there was only 3 publishers that actually even bothered with the Comic Code Authority, and they were Archie, DC, and Bongo Comics. Well, Bongo Comics, it broke off from the Comic Code Authority in 2010, and DC and Archie followed by 2011, January of 2011. And then after that, once those remaining publishers kind of left the Comic Code Authority, it went defunct, and it ceased to exist after that point. And that's really all there is to it. Like, that's all there is, like, all the information that's out there about the Comic Code Authority. I really did a lot of searching and couldn't really find much else. So they explain like how it came about, but they didn't really explain its operation. So that was, I thought was a little interesting. The other question you asked me is about Avon Publishing. So Avon Publishing had Wally Wood and Joe Orlando, among many other fine artists. My question is, did Avon use a company like Eiger House to get their stories? If they did, what was the name of the supplier? When did Avon start business, and when did it cease operations? Okay, so Eiger House, and there's like a bunch. Eiger House, Bernard Bailey, Sanger, there's a bunch of these packaging companies. Well, Avon didn't use a packaging company. Packaging companies basically would produce artwork and stories for other companies. Avon didn't do that. They did stuff internally. Now, Avon actually started as a company, as a book publishing company, and it started in 1941. And it basically published pocket-sized books. That was their niche. And they're actually still running. They're not out of business. They didn't go out of business. However, in 2010, Avon became an imprint of HarperCollins, which is a fairly major publisher. In terms of comics, they didn't really last that long. Basically, they ran from 1945 was the first Avon comics, and they ran up till 1956. So really, once the code came into play, Avon as a comic company kind of disappeared, and it went back to just publishing books. It actually produced some crazy books. It produced books about satanic rituals and a whole bunch of things over the years. So, that didn't mean that they got any less controversial after the code. They just did it in their books instead of in comics. But that's really all there is to Avon. They had a huge number of titles during the Golden Age, like over 60 titles. Just a massive amount of stuff that they produced during the Golden Age. Okay, next question comes from Mr. E, the low-grade king. He asked, I lost What If 25. I bought another copy. A lot of people were reacting to my lost comic, and I still haven't found it, by the way. Then I found the one I lost. Now I have 2. Now, since I'm on What If, what is your favorite What If cover? Okay, so I'm going to show you my very favorite What If cover, and it's a very simple one. I just like it. And it's this one right here. So, what if Jane Foster found the hammer of Thor? Now, this one, I like it because of really silly reasons. Okay, I like the fact that it's, a sexy version of Thor. That's one reason. But I like the fact that it's an homage of the original Journey into Mystery 83, the first appearance of Thor. I just think that's cool. So I like that kind of element to it. So this is my favorite cover of the series. So yeah, so what if Jane Foster had found the Hammer of Thor, which is what if number 10. Okay, last question comes from Ron Hubbs. This is kind of a funny question because last week I showed a lot of good girl art. I was showing like some Archies and some various titles that I thought had pretty great good girl art. But his question says, what? No Matt Baker? So I figured, hey, I should show some Matt Baker good girl art. So that's how we're going to end this. I'll show you a bunch of great Matt Baker good girl art. So we're going to start out with Canteen Kate number 1. And this is Canteen Kate. I just think that's a really great cover. And I'm going to show you some more Canteen Kate. So we have Canteen Kate number 3, I believe. Is this number 3? Number 2. Number 2. I always get the numbers mixed up. It's just a close-up of Canteen Kate. And we got Pictorial Romances number 9. And what else we got here? Got Wartime Romances. I think this one's really cool. I like the thing I like about Matt Baker is the fact that he can capture these scenes where it's multi-layered. You know, you got some action happening back here, and you got some action happening up here, where it's 2 different things going on. I think that's interesting. And this is Wartime Romances number 13. And then we got Teenage Romances number 27. It's more Matt Baker. Kind of looks like a little like Canteen Kate, in my opinion, this one. So I thought that was interesting. And speaking of Canteen Kate, here's one more. This is the last of the run for Canteen Kate. This is Canteen Kate number 3. It's a really great cover for it. It was only a 3-issue run, but it was a great run. And then we got Fighting Marines number 3. This is the second appearance of Canteen Kate. She actually made her first appearance in Fighting Marines number 2. And you see her right there. And Matt Baker did the cover for this one. It's a bit of a war cover, but a little bit of good girl. And another great one. This is Diary Secrets number 16, number 16. And this was actually originally used as an interior panel, but they liked it so much they used it for the cover for a later book. So that's how it became the cover. It's kind of a fun one. Then we got some 7 Seas. Really great good girl cover. This is 7 Seas number 5. Another Matt Baker cover. I really like this one. Very sexy girl and some bit of action going on. And one more South Seas. 7 Seas, 7 Seas number 3. And you got this girl, bit of tentacle stuff going on, and like, I don't know, her legs are just she's just like diving at this octopus thing. It's kind of weird, but it's a cool cover. That's another Matt Baker. And last, the grail of Matt Baker's, we got Phantom Lady 17. So this is my favorite Matt Baker cover. Yeah, I always thought this one was really great. So Phantom Lady 17. And this one was mentioned in the selection isn't because it was called a headlight cover for the headlights. So that is it. Those are some Matt Baker, some good girl art for you. Hopefully you enjoyed. If anyone else has questions that they would like to ask, put it in the comments below, and I'll do my best to try to answer the questions for you. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.